at least with me, I've only ever written. I normally write poetry, right? Because I'm a girl and I'm emotional and it's easier. And shut up.
Never, ever, ever, ever have a secondary character say, "That's so funny. You're so cool." Don't ever, ever do that for a beginning writers type of scenario.
When it's something that was canonically there, that's the bread and butter of a fan fiction writer, to correct those mistakes or maybe even unfulfilled dangling things.
From Glenn Gross's perspective, he says, if you can't answer these questions, then you don't have a story. So I was all ears. I was like, give me the formula.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Writing Prose. I am, of course, Shae the Red with our amazing panel. Yes, that is that many. We'll start with Gib this time. How are you, Gib?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. I like that you can count with your fingers.
This many. I'll break up my toes if you want, but it's going to make it weird.
Please don't.
Yeah.
Keep your shoes on. We also have Cyborg Valkyrie. How are you, hun?
Awesome.
Very cool. And, of course, Eric Canete. How are you, sir?
Hello.
Loquacious as always.
That we came
Yep,
to you
right.
next. We always save the guests for last. Anyway, all right. We have a absolutely phenomenal guest. We have Mr. Andy Smith. How the hell are you, dude?
Hello.
I'm good, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and yeah, I'm doing really well.
I'm so excited. So, we had you on Red Valkyrie Presents for First Man.
Yep.
It's so much fun to have you on and to talk with you about your comic. And one of the topics that we actually had some of our viewers request was, how do you take all of these ideas and start actually writing something? Because we have a lot of people who watch who have a lot of great ideas and then get stuck on that next step because it's intimidating as hell, especially if it's not something that you do frequently or something that you're not, we all have imposter syndrome. I think every episode we have talked about, like, Eric, don't you shake your head because you tell me you're not you're an artist who story tells. That's what you say. You're a freaking writer, sir. Thank you very much.
I don't like that
damn,
memory.
we make Gib bleep.
I mean, I actually kind of agree with that in a way. It's like I'm more of a artist, and then the amount of writing I do, which hasn't been a ton, but I've done some, is I definitely go by the Joe Kubert philosophy. When we were in school, he would say, when you write, put your writing hat on, don't have your pencils and all that. When you pencil, just concentrate on penciling, inking, same thing, lettering, coloring, blah, blah, blah. So I try to do that. I try to break it down. So when I do get the idea for a story, I always try to think of once I get the idea, I try to think of the conclusion to it so I have something to write towards. And then, I'll try and do just an outline, like bullet points of main actions and stuff. So it's basically going large and then going small, small, small. And small, for me, in my mind, is when you're actually at the point of going page, 1 or page 2. You have all this other stuff done in your outline and pre-planning. It could even be, drawing out 20, let's say it's a 22-page book, right? Standard comic. It could be even doing the 22, rectangles that equal a page and just jotting down briefly what is happening on each page, in a couple sentences. That's one way I've tried it. And then the other is just, opening up a Word doc and doing the same thing, numbering after I have like the basic outline, which is, 3 parts. The opening act, act 2, and then the conclusion or whatever. Same thing. Try and take that and then break it down. And then other times I'll get sometimes just from that outline, I'll have cool visuals. And this is like the artist thing, kind of like with Eric, where I'll think to myself, this will just be a cool looking visual. And where should it fall in the book? So.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's definitely also coming at it from a very like comic book, graphic novel centric kind of thought process. So Eric, what about for you when it comes to plotting out? Because you're plotting out the same kind of things, but you've also helped with a lot of scripts and stuff when it comes to like TV, film, and seeing how that process is. So, you know, how do you do it for comics, and then how do you notice that it differs for like film?
Yeah, I think, let's see, everything that Andy spoke about just now, from a utility toolkit standpoint, I think that's pretty transferable, right? So makes sense to always start wide and start and move towards the granular. In the writer's room that I've managed to be able to sit in on, where I try to keep my mouth shut as much as possible, the writer's room is this sort of, it's a weird construct of ideas, and this is back in the day, so there were a ton of post-it notes on the writer room wall, right? Where they kind of have a series outline, right? They need to take the main character or group characters from point A to point B, and if it's a season, they have an end point, and they have a starting point and an end point, and somewhere in there, they start introducing conflict, and then there's a secondary cast of characters and their story arcs, right? So it starts funneling down smaller and smaller. So again, similar to what Andy was talking about, the only difference that I'd seen from, let's say, a one-off comic book, right, versus like a season, is that they often leave a ton of unresolved threads for them to step into much later, right? So they may focus on character A, B, and C for that first season, but in the second season, they know they're going to be able to pick that up again. Or maybe they partition it within seasons. So in an animation season, there's typically, 13 episodes. And so they'll partition that season into like, here's the main story, here's the main character arc in the first 4 episodes. We'll drop off on that, and then we'll pick up, the supporting characters so that we can round them off and make them a little bit more like developed, and then find a way to tie it all in to the last X amount of episodes with those characters in play. So it's really and again, throughout that season, sometimes they don't have those. It's not to say when we start any season of an animation production, there are oftentimes not all the scripts are written.
Right.
So between the script coordinator and the head of story, they're finding ways to like tie pretty bows onto everything, so it all makes sense, right? But it always starts off to the point of the theme of our episode today. It always starts off with like, what is the thing that we're trying to go for this season? What is the overarching message that we're trying to get with these characters? And as long as it points back to that theme, that's a pretty successful season, at least to me.
I was going to say, so it sounds like once you kind of hit like film and movies, well, less so with movies because they're longer and bigger budget. So usually a lot more is done before anybody's going to, start filming that. Not always, but usually a lot more.
To the point of budget, and I'll make it quick. Like Tron was very expensive, right? Like if you add up all the seasons of Tron, it could quite possibly be a feature film budget at that point.
Right. Well, and I wonder if once there's more money put towards it, if there doesn't have to be more of it solidly written, because they're like, if I'm gonna invest this much money in it, I have to know that the next 5 episodes are gonna be solid before I'm gonna put the money into it to start.
That I would hope in spirit that's what they're doing, but in actual practice or an exercise, not necessarily. So the cool thing is that there's many stewards of that narrative during the pre-production pipeline, right? So we are expected to, in part, catch all of those things. Like you guys addressed this in in episode 1. Why is that not implemented here in episode 6 or 7? So I take a lot of pride in being able to, if it filters down to me, there's a big problem. But I take a lot of pride in that. Oftentimes, the directors are on coordination meetings to be like, in my episode, because in any animated production, there's 3 crews working all at the same time, right? So 3 directors, each of them has 3 storyboard artists, and if it filters down to us, we're in production mode, right? So we're not paying attention to, hey, where was that landmine that we're eventually going to step into that the fans are going to catch up, or they're going to catch us on. But there are many occasions where I go like, we didn't address, or this was already addressed in episode 2. Here we are, episode 7. And we're not paying attention, so we need to go find a way around it. And that's really fun to sort of retroactively, like, not fix the script. And I say this tongue-in-cheekly, but you're not fixing the script. You're just finding ways to be like, how do we land that narrative without having to like contradict ourselves 2 episodes, 3 episodes previous.
Right, and I'm wondering if this isn't where, you know, a lot of people don't pay attention to a lot of the stuff that gets set up early on when everyone's still fresh. Nobody has hit that like complete overworked point yet in the first couple episodes. And they're willing to lay like, here's all these little plot lines that we'll pick up in episode 7 and episode 10 and whatever. And then once they get to writing those episodes, they're burned out, they're overworked, they're behind schedule, they're putting everything out that they can, and all of those little threads start to fade away. And so that's why in a lot of these early episodes, you have fans that are like, oh, I can't wait for them to go back and hit that thread, and then they never do. And you're like, what the hell, man? Like, you had it right there.
It's different, right? Because I don't know, it's so many wheels turning at the same time, and they all have to turn in some level of orchestra. Yeah. And it is really, really difficult because once you get into production mode, we are chasing after a deadline. So in as much as I have trouble now writing on my own, I can't imagine what the head of story is having to deal with month in, month out. I had the pleasure of being able to work one office next to Dwayne McDuffie, rest in peace. And I remember walking into his cubicle and looking onto that dreaded whiteboard, and there are just cards and Post-its of him tracking where the season for Ben 10 was going to go. And that was all on him. When scripts get turned in, he eventually becomes the last sort of filtering system to whether or not that thing gets to go down into the pipeline. And I can't imagine the amount of, I mean, it's old hat for him, but for me, I looked at it and I was like, I don't know how you keep all these plates spinning at the same time.
I definitely think it's a lot. So those are really like interesting ways when it comes to more visual storytelling. And like I'm more familiar with, I'm going to set out to tell a story through, you know, videography or film. And this is, I basically do the same kind of thing. The whole like draw really horrible stick figures on, you know, Post-it notes and slap them up and be like, yeah, that'll be a good sequence. And like, all right, let's go do it. If I even get that far, half the time I'm like, I'm just going to film a whole bunch of really cool scenes. And then I'm going to sit down and edit, and I'm going to just slave over it until I find the right place to shoehorn them all in to where it makes sense. And then, you know, inevitably find the one scene that I'm like, I love this scene, but there's no place for it. So I have to drop it. And I'm so sad because it's such a good scene, but logically I can't make it make any sense. But the thing that I think is really unique is we all kind of keep the storytelling script a little loose, you know, and you start kind of refine it when it comes to doing the visual side of it, but you also leave a lot of it ambiguous so the viewers can fill in those gaps naturally. And I think that probably writing novels, since we have Gib on here who is a novelist, I feel like he ends up taking like where we all kind of stop and go, that's a good script, and then we work from there. Gib's like, that's a good outline, now let me actually go and do the script. So out of curiosity, what's it like for you?
All of the above. It really depends on because so sometimes you get a really cool idea. It just gets in your head and it festers like an earworm or an idea worm, for lack of a better word. And you can't let it go. And you have like maybe it's a really cool world or really cool mechanic or really cool something. And you start jotting down notes and you start fleshing out the idea. And that oftentimes will turn into beginnings of a book. But then you have to step back, like anybody else in the creative process knows, that a really cool world is not a story. It's just an idea. You know, you have to populate with characters. So sometimes I have to take a step back and wait for my brain to catch up. Like, maybe I should take this other idea, this one character, and put it into this world. How would that work? And you're constantly playing mix and match in your head, trying to figure out what works. Because sometimes when you're writing your very first book, or first book in a story or a series, it's like the first season of a television show. You don't know their voice yet. Because sometimes you should always write the first couple of chapters, then immediately delete it, because you have to like know the person's voice, because it's more authentic. Because worst happens is when you start writing and if you have no endpoint because you have a cool idea, you get Jurassic World syndrome, meaning Jurassic Park, phenomenal beginning to end, great movie, great book, blah blah blah, but everything that came afterwards was basically like a bolt on that was never meant to be there, and diminishing returns as a whole. And you know, when I can't, his name's Vince Gilligan, Breaking Bad, you know, he knew beginning to end. You know, I've been told Straczynski in Babylon 5, I've never watched it, I just recently just started it, knew beginning to end what was going to happen, and it fits. But if you don't know your ending, you're just kind of like going every which way. I like, for my style is, I like to have my idea, my world, a couple of characters, practice a little bit, and have, say, 6 bullet points per book that I know I want to hit these beats, and I know where the ending is going to be, and then I write organically. And then on the second pass, I clean it up, because sometimes where I ended up is not where I began. I want to make there's a verisimilitude between the characters all through the through line, and have to go back through to make sure that happens. It doesn't always work, but you try your best with each book thereafter. And sometimes you have to take that leap of faith, trusting yourself and trusting the world and trusting the work, because nothing's worse than a really cool world with very boring characters in it, you know. And if they have nothing to say or do, that's like, you can have like it's a very, very fancy sports car that it has no gas. It just sits in your driveway and looks pretty, but it has nothing, no heart, no soul. So
absolutely. All right, we have somebody who we weren't sure was gonna make it, so give us just one quick second.
Nice.
Oh, beautiful.
Exactly.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Very happy that you could join us. So, to catch you up to speed on what we've been talking about, we're talking about storytelling and how
Hold
you
on,
start.
Shae, you're going to have to repeat
So,
that. 1 second. Because
why?
I can hear an echo.
Oh, the audio
Yeah.
shit. Fuck.
Shit, fuck.
Hey, look at who we found. We found a Graham.
Yay! Completely
alright.
spontaneously. Yeah.
Spontaneous Graham appears.
I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd stop in.
There you go.
You know, we appreciate it. We really do. All right, so we just talked to Gib about how he storytells for novels specifically. Sai, do you have a different approach at all to how you kind of go about your storytelling, taking it from an idea and making it into an actual story?
So, as some of you may be aware, my forays into writing thus far have either been original work that no one has seen, or the dreaded, much maligned fan fiction.
Why dreaded?
Because I heard you talking shit last episode, Eric. I have ears.
you
That's
kind
my
of
fault.
did.
A little bit. It's okay though.
So,
I'll let myself out.
You stay right there, Eric.
So basically, it's a similar process, but it's slightly different in that you're starting out with a world, and when you have that world, you have to decide when you're writing where's the snapshot in time you're taking this from, because it's already an established world. It usually already has a pretty developed timeline. And there's going to be a certain point where you just cannot stand something that the actual creators of that IP or what have you have decided to do. And so you snatch it at that point, and then you start making decisions with those characters, with that world. What should have gone differently in your mind? What were the fans looking for that, for whatever reason, and we've covered this on other episodes, whatever reason, the creatives, the executives, whoever has decided not to go in that direction. And so it's quite a bit of wish fulfillment, and you have a very free hand in the sense that these are not your characters to damage. This is not your world to fuck up. So you can do anything you want. I mean, you are never going to hurt that IP because it's such a niche. Granted, there are absolutely millions of people out there who go to either create or consume fan fiction, but it's a much freer hand. I don't know that I could work in like a big two kind of environment or under the pressure of I don't know want to say reporting to somebody, but being beholden to somebody, I guess you could say, because in a fan fiction type of writing, you're very much writing for yourself, beholden to yourself, and what
Right.
you feel is the justice for those characters. So you start out with that idea of what went wrong, and how do I fix that, or what was the missed opportunity here. If it's not just a decision that you can't that you disagree with, what promise did they fail to fulfill on? Tying back to what we were talking about earlier, with all those little things that you start with at the beginning of a story, that maybe never just get followed up on. You think of a world that's really rich in characters and story and background, that they've just woven this amazing tapestry of like Babylon 5. All right, Straczynski did amazing things with that, but some things just could not make it to the screen, whether it was budgetary reasons or time or pace. Something had to give. So exploring those nuances of it, I've forgotten the fucking question at this point.
Well, it's a lot like what we were talking about before, where it's like there's certain threads that'll get laid down early on in a lot of like film and TV and movie, and depending on budgetary restraints, depending on what crew stuck around, what seemed to go well in earlier episodes with fans and stuff, will depend on which lines they pick up or which they even remember that they had. And I think that's kind of really where fanfic like picks up. But like you said, since you're not really beholden to anything, I think that that's also partially why fanfic can get such a bad rap, is because you have a lot of people who take beloved IPs and they're like, this is what I think should have happened, and the vast majority of people are like, no, I disagree with you entirely. I don't know why you just did that. That was horrible. And I think that that's where a lot of the negative stigma around fanfic kind of comes in. That, and because some people are really precious about their IPs, and anyone doing anything different with them is a bit of a hassle. But Graham, I want to know your process. What do you do?
Well, I work in a visual medium, and as a writer artist, I think visually. So the first things that I do is I start with a plot. And then I build like a foundation. I build on that plot, and I think of scenes for how do I get from point A to point B in the most interesting way. And so, I know the direction from the plot, and then I'm constantly building on that plot, inserting scenes to get my characters from point A to point B, and finally to that final third act. That's primarily how I work. So, but because I do I think things visually, I can actually sit down and sketch out an idea and see if it translates the way I'm thinking of it. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it causes some problems, but most of the time, I can lay it. If I'm having a problem in the thinking process of plotting and say typing it out, I'll take to the board and work it out visually, and see if what I've got in mind is actually doable. So I'm constantly going back and forth between the writing and the visual.
Well, and see, I think that that's a benefit that a lot of you artists who are storytellers, since most of you refuse to call yourself writers, which is ridiculous because you still are. You just write differently. I think that's a benefit that you guys have, is because when you get stuck with the words, you're like, okay, the words aren't working for me. Let me draw it. Whereas for me, I'm like, I'm stuck with the words, and I'm like, let me cry over the fact that I am not going to be able to draw this in any way that's going to look like I'll start drawing it, and then I just go, nope, scrap the whole thing. It all sucks. I'm done. I'm gonna go drink a beer. Like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, but even with not being an artist and stuff, you can still lay down basic stick figures or whatever
Yeah.
to help out to get the point across.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing when it comes to doing visual, comic books is, and I take this into account when I'm writing scenes, is when you're working for Marvel, DC, or whoever like that has ads in their books, you don't have the luxury of knowing where they're going to put the ads. But doing what we do now, we know that it's straight through story. There's no ads to break anything up. So you always know, for instance, it's going to be after page 1, it's going to be even odd. So on an even page, if there's something really dramatic that you want to have a big impact, you should put it on an even page. So you have to turn the page to see it. Because if you put it on a odd number page, when you turn the page, it's visual. You're going to see it.
Yeah.
Before you start reading page, the
Your
left-hand
eye will
page.
jump ahead and be like,
Yeah,
"That's
you're just going to
badass!"
see
Like,
it
hold on,
in
I
your
need to
peripheral
set up.
vision. Well, that was a thing in First Man Volume 2. I was working with my buddy Rob Snyder on it, co-writing wise, and there were a couple times in it I was like, I had to kind of break him and go, dude, we can't have that reveal on a odd number page, because as soon as you turn the page, you're just going to see it.
It'll blow the reveal, yeah.
Yeah, it'll blow it.
loses
You
the
gotta
impact.
right. So it helps, at least for me, knowing that, to when it comes to the pacing and laying out the story, writing wise, to know, okay, reveals will pretty much happen here,
That's really interesting. So the thing that I've noticed, at least with me, I've only ever written, I normally write poetry, right? Because I'm a girl and I'm emotional and it's easier and shut up. All right. So I write a lot of poetry. I also
It's
do
so
a lot of
true.
short stories. It really is. Look, when you're an emo edgelord with, this
Go on.
female side, you stick with poetry. You Edgar Allan Poe. No, so
I was 22 once. I did the same thing. It's okay.
All my poems
pretend
started
I'm
with there was a man
22.
from Nantucket.
I'm sorry, Shae. Did you say an
Whoa.
emo edgelord with a female side? I feel attacked.
yeah, you
Yes,
essentially
thank
you.
Thank you.
Yes. So what I was gonna say is I also do a lot of short stories, because the short stories, I don't have to worry so much about the setup, and I'm realizing now I'm trying to sit down and write a one shot off of an idea from a good friend of mine in size, and he kind of just softballed up here's this idea. It's loosely based on an actual person. Ready, go. And I started reading it, like reading up on this person, and I was like, okay, so I know some of the major beats that I want to hit in the comic. I know how the comic is going to end, right? And now I'm like, I have to know all the backstory of this thing before I can start even writing where this is taking place. So I ended up researching. It has to do with, it's centered around Elizabeth Bathory. I started researching Elizabeth Bathory and then finding female serial killers throughout history, all the way up to when this book is going to take place. And I have done so much like back end research and have so many ideas of, this is how this is going to pass from one to the other and get to all of this. And I've done all of this work. I have yet to actually write anything. And I have probably 2/3 of the story worked out in my head. And now I'm terrified to sit down and be like, I gotta plot this out. Like, I gotta, like, this is what the pages are gonna look like. And then maybe as an add-on, I could do the backstory as an ash can or something. And it's like the most daunting thing in the world, despite the fact that I know all the major hits that I want to hit, getting there in a way that's going to, because I've become precious about it. It's now like something that I really care about. And I want people to have the same excitement that I did when I started piecing stuff together. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And I'm like, what if I fuck it up? Like, no one will read it. Oh no. And so now I'm just sat here in this ball of anxiety and like staring at a blank page, terrified to type anything.
Well, I think that writers and artists all suffer at some point from analysis paralysis,
Oh yeah.
where
Good.
you can't get past your own head,
Yes.
and you have to get something down on the board. And when I've always learned from great writers and artists that when the muse fails you, craft kicks in, and that's what will keep you on score and on deadline. Get something down and work on it later. It doesn't have to be perfect, but get it down and get that train moving in the right direction. You can always come back and revisit it and fix it later, but it helps you open that door and get you through and get you on to the next phase.
Well, it's that whole thing of motion will get you going. So if you're with analysis paralysis, if you're just sitting there and you're just like paralyzed, well, what's that mean? You're not moving, right? So whether you're writing or drawing or whatever, it could even be, you can apply it to going, if you want to exercise. I remember somebody saying once, just move a finger, right? That's a little movement. And then go, okay, now I'm going to pick up my pencil from a drawing standpoint and just start, moving your hand around on the paper, drawing something. And then it gets you moving like a train, the old train that's chugga, 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 chugga. And it just builds up that momentum. And the next thing you know, it'll break you out of your head and you won't even realize it anymore. And then it just kind of will click in and you'll start going. And now you might have to go back
and redo all
you might have to go back a half hour. You might have to go back and rewrite what you originally wrote because you realize it was crap, but it got you moving. Or you might have to go back and erase what you drew because you realize that was just the crap that got me moving to here. But it's better than just sitting there going, it'll hit me.
Yeah.
No, it'll hit me. I know it's going to hit me.
One of the great golden age artists was a guy named Mort Meskin, and he worked for the Eisner Iger Studios. He worked for Simon and Kirby, and he had a wonderful career in advertising too later on in the 60s. But he was paralyzed by the blank page. He would stare at it for hours, and Will Eisner would just come up, take a pencil, and go like this, and put it across his page, and now it wasn't blank anymore.
Yeah.
And then he could get in and start working.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've had the opposite where I had one of my novels I was working on, fifth in a series, and I reached right around 50, 60,000 words, so like just over the halfway mark for one of my style of books. And I was looking at it, I'm like, I'm barely into the second act. This is not good, and I had to go back. Like, it's just, yes, I could write a longer book. I know some writers do, but my style, like, if I can get it to 90 to 100,000 words, so 30,000, 30,000, 30,000 with little pluses and minuses. So you act 1, act 2, act 3, or, with variables thereof. But I'm like, I am barely touching the second act, and we're way over threshold. What did I screw up on? And I had to literally go back, and I cut out 25, almost 30,000 words. Like, almost had to restart over from scratch because and it felt like just a wasted period of time, but I learned basically what not to do. And I stole some of the ideas that had come back later for it, but when I'm sitting there trying to write, sometimes if I get stuck, like, not writer's block, because it's still there, but I'm having a hard time visualizing where the scene goes. I get out legal pads, something Quentin Tarantino used to talk about. He's like, whenever he got stuck, he would literally just write to himself, like talk to himself by like, what am I doing wrong? Why are these characters so dumb? And he would go, because you forgot about this, this, and this. And then boom, his brain told him the answer without realizing it. And it really works. And I've got stacks of legal passes filled with handwritten bullshit that I go back and like, I wish I could had better handwriting. I can't. There it is.
Shae, has it occurred to you that we're on a panel of people who do that, and that also serial killers do that?
What?
I mean, oh my gosh!
Wow.
So Gibbs is super serial killers.
You got to put in a will after you go. That needs to be published.
Most of them are just dick pics, but it doesn't matter. So.
Just bequeath it to me, Gibby. I'll sort it.
Old school. He's actually drawing the dick pics. He's like, oh yeah, this is,
I was gonna say, it's just like, and I said this before, the rubber
duck.
Talk
to the rubber duck. Yep.
And this is probably something that I need to utilize a hell of a lot more. So if you don't know, this is what a lot of programmers use when their code doesn't work. So after you've been typing hours and hours and hours of code, and you've got so many tiny little spaces or dashes or dots or whatever that will mess up your code and break it entirely, what they do is they all have little rubber ducks that usually sit on their desk, and they'll put it on their desk and they go, okay, Herbert, I'm going to explain to you what my code is. And they walk through line by line of everything that the code has written down and everything it's supposed to do. And because they're explaining it to a rubber ducky, they usually end up going, oh, I put an extra space. Hold on. And they delete it out. Then they run it and they go, oh, it works. Okay. Thank you, Herbert. You can go back. Like, it's just, I just needed to talk to the duck for a second. And yes, my rubber duck is named Herbert.
Well, that reminds me of when I used to teach. Same thing, except I was in front of a classroom full of students, and it was a storytelling class, and I was explaining, whatever the lesson was for that day, because it was only, a couple times a week. And it really helped me out because I was verbalizing what I do. And you don't do that when you're at your desk drawing or writing. You're just doing it,
Right.
But when you actually verbalize what you're doing, it does kind of awaken something where you're like, oh, yeah. And then when I would go back to my desk and draw later in the day or whatever, it did seem to flow a little more easy because I just spent a couple hours explaining it,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Well,
It
and
does. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, when you talk, you use a different part of your brain
yes.
when you're just thinking. And I was talking to Billy the other day. He asked me what the plot was to my next book, The Ghosts of Matacumba Key, and I was trying to explain it to him. And I realized that I got to a point that's a sticking point for me that I hadn't worked out yet. And as I'm talking about it, I actually thought of a way out of the hole I was in.
Right. Well, and that's the whole nice thing about bouncing things back and forth is sometimes I'll be in my head trying to get around a scene or something like that, and it's just not working. Mm-hmm. And I'll call up, a friend or whatever, and just start talking to them about it. And even though they're just kind of listening, because I need to break it down and explain it more than what's in my head, it starts coming together. And then, with some input, it just kind of
I have this one buddy I call. Sorry.
No.
I have this one buddy I call from time to time that, like, whenever I'm stuck, and he's a very dear friend, but we're like brothers, which means we are very contentious, and he hates all my writing. He likes nothing. And but he's a long, many decades Dungeons and Dragons type guy. So he's constantly creative, constantly creating, constantly. So his ideas are great, mine all suck. That's how brothers work.
Fair.
So I call him up and I'm like, hey Adam, I'm stuck on this thing. He's like, let me hear it. And da 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 da. He's like, well, here's what you should do. It gives me an idea. I'm like, that sucks. Because what you should do. Oh, I got the answer. Never mind. And I hang up. But, I do it to him all the time.
That's horrible.
Well, he's an asshole.
I was going to say, from an editor standpoint, that's something that I try to really encourage a lot of writers to do, especially if they're newer writers or if you have an extensive cast, right? If you're sitting here with a cast that has, 10, 15, 20 different people, and they all have an individual voice because that's what you've set up, the easiest way for you to tell if you are slipping voice is to say it out loud. Mm-hmm. Whatever crazy accent you're trying to get across, whatever, anything, say exactly what you've written out loud in the voice that it should be, because then you're going to find it when people are like, you all are being silly. And then it's like, nah, it should be y'all are ridiculous.
Right.
Like, there you go. That's the voice. You're not writing to your voice. You're getting into that grammar set. And this is the one time when you're writing that you can say, fuck the grammar, and put whatever you want on page to help get your accent across, to help get that natural cadence. And when you have a back and forth with people, that's usually when people are slipping character the most. Or if you started something where it's really kind of highbrow and not what normally you would say or people would say, but the character is a pretentious douche, and so he does. That's one of the hardest voices to maintain because it's not something that you use.
Right.
So that's the easiest one to slip. And the amount of times that I'll be reading something, because I get the benefit of reading it all at once. You've been slaving over it for months and months and months, and these pages and everything. And so it becomes this like weird amalgamation of like, I don't even know where I am anymore in the story. I've done so many things and I've changed so many things, and all of those things stay in the back of your head. So it's hard to flush them and look at it fresh, which is why you should have an editor. Go figure. But I'll go through and read and be like, so you started all of this really highbrow, and then you can tell that you got tired of trying to figure out how to be a pretentious douche because it slipped more and more and more. And I was like, and unless this is a plot point where like his veneer is slipping and he's just really like a lowbrow asshole that's pretending to be smart, and it's like, oh no, they're just really intelligent. I'm like, cool. These last 3 speech bubbles don't work then. If that's what we're doing, we've got to go back and rewrite them because that isn't going to work.
Right.
Yeah, turning a phrase is an important way of getting information across
yeah.
to the readers that is not done in a boring way.
Yeah.
There's a great scene in the Burt Kennedy film The War Wagon where these 2 gunmen, are dick measuring basically. Yeah, these 2 guys, try to shoot them. They both draw at the same time, super fast, and they kill the bad guys. And it was Kirk Douglas and John Wayne, and Kirk Douglas says, "Mine hit the ground first." Basically saying, I shot faster. And then John Wayne says, "Mine was taller."
Nice.
That's such a great line, but it tells you
is.
everything you need to know. It tells
Right.
you that they're contentious, they're competitive against one another,
Yep.
and neither one is giving ground.
Right.
I love clever dialogue like that.
Oh, me too. I think that that's something a lot of people could spend more time. Like, people spend so much time worrying about making a really complex background and then trying to pick all those threads back up. And I was like, honestly, a lot of people could spend more time in doing relatable, convincing dialogue between characters and finding ways to do that kind of back and forth that's a little bit, contentious or whatever, instead of being like, and they were enemies. And like, okay, cool, they were enemies.
Or
but
if
like,
he just states the obvious, hey, I'm still faster than you.
Yeah.
That states the
Right.
obvious, but
yeah, and it's very it has a different it feels like arrogant, but it feels arrogant without being like, it feels arrogant and narcissistic, as opposed to the example you had given, which felt more like arrogant because it's deserved, and really I'm still a relatable person. I'm a people person, and it's really just that you're the narcissist and that's why you can't see it. Kind of like, it gives that kind of back and forth a little
Right.
bit more. That's a hell of a lot more entertaining than reading a narcissist on a paper, which is what almost all fantasy tends to do with their bad guys, is they're just horrible narcissists.
Well, even that little bit that, Graham, you just explained with John Wayne and Kirk Douglas, that little bit of dialogue even shows the relationship they have to each other.
Yeah.
Because
exactly
if it was,
yeah.
if John Wayne and Kirk Douglas's characters didn't know each other from Adam, and this was like the first time, and they happened to do it, and Kirk Douglas did throw that little shot out like that,
That'd be very weird.
Adam, John Wayne probably would have replied differently if he never knew the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can make you drop faster if you would like.
Yeah, whatever.
So I'll just shoot
So-
you.
That's a
Can I ask the
scenario where.
panel-
Go ahead.
Go ahead, go.
No, you
I was going to ask
go
the
ahead.
panel: Are we? I'm trying to think of everything from like a noob / beginning art writer,
Uh-huh.
right? And you guys are talking a level of advance that this my first time around. I'm thinking from our audience's standpoint. I'm like, wow, this is like step 10, step 20.
Well, I'll break
so I
that
wanted
down
to
Barney
ask-
style if
Oh,
you like.
I wanted to ask the panel if you guys ever defer to a sort of like the beginner steps of a writing structure. The one that immediately comes to mind when you're writing screenplays is the one that everybody recommends, is something like Save the Cat, which is they break the 3-act structure down, I think, as commonly understandable as possible, right? And I'm wondering if anybody on the panel goes through those same kinds of steps. I know we write in different spaces, but do you guys have those, again, like a structure that you guys would go to?
I'll start it,
Yeah.
and anyone else can just jump in. By all means, once you have your character and you know they're good guy, whatever, your protagonist, here's the thing, blah, 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 adversity, whatever it is, nature, villain, whatever themselves, and then you've culmination. But if you're trying to portray your character in such a way that they're either funny, make them tell a joke. If they're cool, make them do cool things, etc. Never, ever, ever, ever have a secondary character say, "That's so funny, you're so cool." Don't ever, ever do that for a beginning writer's type of scenario. It irks the ever-living shit out of me when I read it or I see it. Like, case in point, I'll use movies as example. I'm not opening a can of worms, but the Brie Larson Captain Marvel movie, there's somewhere around the midpoint where she's at her lowest. Her best friend's like, "You're Carol, the best girl I've ever known, the strongest in the," and like they had to list her accolades for her / the audience. And I was watching it like this because that was so cringy because it's just bad writing. Yeah. I'm not opening a can of worms about the movie. Right. I could rail about it all day, but different ways. But always, if you want your character to do something cool, make him do something cool. And it's like being altruistic with your character. Don't do it for the sake of looking for rewards. Just make them do something. Show it happen. Don't tell me it happens. And you don't need to explain every other little thing. And like, because the weapon he wore was his gift from his father. And this is like, no. Don't do that. Don't just let the reader's imagination or whether it's a comic, a movie, a book, let them piece it together. I didn't need to know what a Kessel Run was, Star Wars. He just said, this ship did this in 11, and they're like, that's a hunk of junk. He's like, well, and he's like, made this Kessel Run, and it kept on going. My brain goes, what is it? Is it a race? Is it a cool thing? Oh, no time. But I filled it in. Once they actually showed it to me, leave a little mystique. Don't ever have someone list their accolades, and show, don't tell.
Exactly.
Bingo. And this is a participatory medium. You know, there's a certain amount of interplay that the reader has to engage in, and that's what makes it fun. You know, it's the same thing with art. You know, a painting, you know, you have to be able to, you don't have to see everything. You have to see what the artist wants you to see, and then you fill in the rest of the blanks. You know, another movie example is Ride Lonesome. These two guys meet. They've obviously known each other. The one guy says, you're a long way from home. Well, I could say the same for you. Yeah, but I can go back. We don't know what he did. But we know he can't go back. And that's all we need to know about that guy's character at that point. You know, he's done something, you know. So, you know, it's if it's not something that you can show, or you don't want to get bogged down in all those visuals, you can get away with it by planting the seed in the reader's mind, and then the reader goes into his head and says, well, what did he do? You know, and fills that in himself.
Well, and there's plenty of times where you can put the little tiny hints of things. Like if you want it to be that this was, you know, a dagger that they got from their dad or something like that, and that's why it matters so much, you can make them oddly possessive of the dagger. You don't have to explain why. And it can actually end up being a good turning point way down the line when the character decides that somebody is safe enough for them to open up more, where they can open up about what the deal is with the dagger and why they're so possessive over it and why it matters so much, even at their own detriment or safety or whatever, where it's like, it's a fucking knife, like leave it, it's fine. It's like, you don't understand. I can't. Like that matters more than the potential danger that I might put myself in to get it back. And this is why you can do that, but people do it all up. Everybody wants to do everything up front. You want everything up front center so everybody knows. And it's like, all that you do is you kill the pacing, you kill the mystery, you kill me slowly falling in love with your character, because now it's okay, he's weirdly possessive about a dagger that he has, and he's kind of a dick to everybody about it who doesn't get it, which is silly because, you know, you should say something about it. But like, it's because it changes how that character feels. If you have a character who, you know, seems even keel level-headed and then loses their shit over a fucking knife and then goes back to even keel and is like, I don't want to talk about it. And you're like, well, what the hell was that about? Like, now I'm invested in your character.
Yeah, you're dropping these little nuggets along the way to hopefully pay off, you know, down the line.
The good nugget, not the bad
nugget. The breadcrumb. You're dropping. That's what I meant to say. You're dropping the little breadcrumbs down the way.
We're gonna stay with nuggets. You're
dropping the little shots of alcohol along the way. Oh yeah, this is going to pay off.
There is a YouTube channel called Film Courage. I don't know if any of you guys follow it, but it primarily centers around screenplays, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in there too, as well as like directors and producers end up talking about 45 minutes about their process, their experiences in getting there. their films out. And there is a writer by the name of Glenn Gers. Do you guys know who he is?
I do.
And he gives, I mean, this is how my brain, as simple as it is, operates. I literally need the formula sitting in front of me. So that's why Save the Cat was so important for me, to understand why successful 3-act structures work, because they're hitting these beats at a very specific time in the movie. Now, you can break that all you want, but with missing those things, that's why sometimes movies feel a little disjointed.
Yep.
But in Glenn Gers's, from Glenn Gers's perspective, he says, if you can't answer these questions, then you don't have a story. So I was all ears. I was like, give me the formula, right? So it's 6. Who is the story about? What do they want? Why can't they get it? What do they do about that? Why doesn't that work? And then how does it end? Now, somewhere in there's like a bit where it says like, why doesn't that work? There's a secondary thing that you can put like, well, what do they do to eventually make it work? And then how does it end? And for me, as a starting writer, like, let me understand how this works and how a narrative feels like a full meal. Now, you can get this messed up. It can become really clumsy if you adhere to it too sort of like blindly, right? But I think as a good starting off point, that is essential for somebody like, oh, I don't know how to make a story structure work. That one, to me, when you break it down to its basics, is a really good sort of, touchstone, really good handrail.
Absolutely.
I don't know how any of you feel about that.
Well, I don't like a lot of rules. I'm like Elmore Leonard in that, there's a certain intuitiveness to storytelling that can't be broken down like science. William Goldman once said, get your hero. What does he want? Why does he want it? And what's he going to do to get it? And then your job then is to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, to prevent him from getting that. That's about all the rules I need to break it down into an interesting story. I don't like, by this point in time, you have to have this happen. Or, I just don't believe in that,
Well, and
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm so sorry. I do it all the time. I apologize. Well, because I had pulled up Elmore Leonard's top 10 rules of do's and do nots, because something I had looked at many, many times. Yeah. I would say 5 of them I agree with and 5 of them I don't. And sure. I'm no Elmore Leonard, but you have to know when to break the rules. It's kind of like I assume I'm a bad artist, but I love to draw. But one thing all the artist friends say the same thing is, you can't break the rules until you know the rules. You have to know how to draw properly before you can deform something and do it the right way. Make something.
True.
So. He says always use the word said. I don't like that. I never have. I use it most of the time, 70% of the time. But if someone said, someone, I don't like that in a dialogue scene. Sometimes someone can, no, blank countered, because it gives it a sense of a play. Because as books become more audiobooks these days, because there's 4.5 million ebooks on Amazon right now, but there's only like 500,000 audiobooks on Audible. It's a much bigger, you're a bigger fish, and that's where I make the bulk of my sales. But those readers, consumers of audiobooks, are so voracious that they want the dialogue to be slightly different. They don't like, because said, so-and-so said. It's very repetitive when you hear it being read back to you.
Yeah. Right. It breaks up the monotony even when you're reading it on a page.
It does.
So you have to
same word over and over.
Right. Your brain skips over it when you're reading it, because it's just blank. Because said, it's just but when you're hearing it back to you, you have to break it up. But that's one of those things, you have to know the rule to break the rule.
Yeah, exactly. Sai.
Yes.
You've been so quiet.
I've been amazingly not.
Say, really?
Yes.
Sai's been sending me all dog-eared notes. No, Sai's been sending me notes on my book, because when it's time to do the second draft, I think we're up to page 89
yes.
Oh my God.
Out of like a 300-page book.
Look,
so
you're on a show.
There are only 25 more pages to fix.
5 more pages to go.
25.
It's okay.
I was gonna ask you, because this is something that I want to know from a more fanfic kind of centered thought process. What do you do when you hit a plot hole? Because that's almost like fanfic inception.
You
like
when I hit one of my own, or one that was actually in canonical.
No, when you hit one of your own. So you have found the plot hole where you're starting your fanfic from. What happens when you run into a plot hole?
when I run into one of my own creation, or it's pointed out to me, because in fan fiction you get direct feedback. You get people right underneath whatever chapter it is saying, "Hey, you really fucked up here." So I mean, you have to take that with a certain amount of grace. You can go back and re-edit it, or you can find a really magical way to fix it in the future. Maybe it wasn't really a plot hole to begin with, or maybe it really was, and you just want to not admit it, and so you fix it going forward and try to make it into something cool. But when it's something that was canonically there, that's the bread and butter of a fan fiction writer, is to go back and to correct those mistakes, or maybe even unfulfilled dangling things that the creators have left sitting there.
Unfulfilled dangling things.
Yes,
So I said dangling.
Eric and I both went 5-year-old instantly. We're like,
wow. It's like when I'm talking, someone else has to be the 5-year-old.
yes, precisely.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. No, and sometimes you just write yourself into a corner. I will be perfectly honest. I have not written in over a year because I am in such a fucking corner. I'm going to have to take what I've written, over 100,000 words, rip it apart and redo it because I am in such a corner. And I do not want to borrow from Shae's least favorite writer and just invent a magic teleportation device that the person suddenly had all along.
R.A. Salvatore.
Yeah.
That's who we're
Okay.
discussing.
I was like,
sorry.
oh, who's this?
So
I will blast this name all day long. Listen here, buddy. People
Is this
don't
where
just-
Dritz had the teleporting thing the whole
yes,
time?
yes,
Yes.
in the cave where there's yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't do that to my readers. I don't want to sound snooty. I have to hold myself to a higher standard than the people whose world I'm borrowing to fix. So I can't take that cheap way out. So what I'm going to have to do is go back and retool the narrative to not put myself in that corner again, because there literally is no way out of it other than magic.
That's a really interesting thing that you just said too, and I think this is again where a lot of fanfic kind of gets a negative rap, because it sounds on its face, it sounds narcissistic, the whole I have to hold myself to a higher standard, but I think it's really more out of respect for the franchise and what was already created. There was this entire world created. It had a huge fan base that was surrounded by it, and then there was one or several missteps that had happened along the way. And if you're going to go in as a fanfic writer and say, I'm going to try and fix this, you have to be on your shit, because it's already done by an entire crew of people who have lived and breathed in this world for all this time, and they had a misstep. If you go in as Joe Blow Nobody over here and are like, I'm gonna fix it, and then you don't hold yourself to an incredibly high standard, the likelihood that you're gonna fall flat on your face and actually end up producing something that is really kind of just disrespectful to what already came. The idea is that you liked this so much, because if it was a bad series, if it was a bad story, there's no point in doing fanfic of it, because you're not really a fan, you know?
Yes.
But if it's got to be something that drew you in, it's got to be something that had a lot of intrinsic value for you.
By the way, that's called a
And then
hate fic, in case you are wondering.
Yeah, exactly. And then you sit there, you look at it and you go, you know what? I wish that this one part just didn't fall as flat as it did. And so in order for you to go in and fix that, you already have a healthy love for all these characters in this world and the respect that needs to be there. You've got to hold yourself up to that higher standard. Otherwise, really, you're way worse than whoever made
Right.
the call, whether it was budget, time, director change, whatever. That puts you way worse than the people that you're fixing, which is a huge problem.
And Eric, I know I'm interpreting your hand gesture to mean you have something to add.
No.
Okay. If not, I was going to mention one other thing, but it looked like you had something to add, so I wanted to be respectful
No.
of your visual cue. Okay.
I'm listening.
The other thing, So there are two sides to that coin, right? For many, fan fiction audiences can be extraordinarily forgiving, but that it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the more they have to forgive, in the worst light your writing is viewed.
Mm-hmm.
So while they won't call you out on it, that is reflected in the amount of comments you get, and the amount of it's called kudos, the amount of comments, kudos, and bookmarks, subscriptions, all that kind of stuff that you'll get. The reverse side of that is, if you want to be serious about it, if you want to use it as the creative exercise that it is, as the kind of whetstone to sharpen your writing skills, you have to take it as a creator more seriously than what the audience is willing to let you get away with.
That's a fair.
That's kind of how I've used it. I've read it since I was a teen, and anyone who knows me in real life understands that is several years. And I read it for all this time, and eventually I just came to the point of being tired of waiting to read what I felt should have happened. I've been tired of waiting for someone to have my thoughts. And I had to start doing the writing myself. But if anything, this is writing something in kind of reasonably low pressure stakes like that has to such an extent honed my ability to actually write and to definitely edit, that far beyond what it was before.
That is really awesome. All right, so we've been going for about an hour. I would say that this is a good spot to wrap up, and I think maybe just a teensy bit of punishment is in order. I think Graham should have to go first with Gibbs' questions.
Okay, cool.
Because he has
now
no
I know
idea.
what I'm in store for.
He has no idea.
You get a
what's
different
coming.
question.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, you will.
You don't get the same question.
Okay.
Fire away.
Graham, are you ready? All right. On a nice summer day, you're outside your house, just enjoying the beautiful weather, and it's just great. You look up in the sky, and it's all sunny and blue, and it's fantastic. Then an unscheduled eclipse happens. Sun, the moon moving across the way, blocking out the sun. At first, everything is cool, but then the eclipse doesn't pass. It stays still. The earth begins to shake and split open. You feel something at your leg. You look down, and a tentacle with eyes has you by the ankle. All around, cracks, things are crawling up. Elder things. They're now awake. They're hungry, and they're looking for flesh. You have one weapon of choice, 3 books, and 1 luxury item. What do you do?
1 weapon of choice, 3 books,
And a luxury item, because I'm nice.
Yeah.
and a luxury item. Okay.
Come on,
Don't
creative
worry.
types. You're on the spot.
In post-production, I'm going to insert something like the Jeopardy theme, not the actual Jeopardy theme because copyright, but
Just do I'm a little teapot. It's close enough.
yes.
There you go.
All right.
Because that's not
weapon of-
copyrighted.
Who owns I'm a
am I
little
using
teapot? Go ahead. No, sorry. Go ahead.
What do I need a weapon for? The world is breaking up, and I'm assuming I'm dying because this thing's got me by my leg. And
I'd scratch you by the ankle. It's a little tentacle. I mean, you can hack your way
all
through
right.
and run.
Weapon of choice, shotgun. Books, Encyclopedia Britannica, so I can swat the bugs. And what was the last one? Oh, luxury item.
Well, you get 3 books, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I got the whole encyclopedia, so
Okay.
I'll take 3 of them. I'll take A, B, and C.
Okay.
And then luxury item, bourbon.
Solid.
Solid choice.
I love it. I was waiting for Graham to be like, well, I look down at the little tentacle and go, stop, what you doing later?
Smash you with my 2 fists.
Yes! 2 fist manly tails.
Get him with my little tentacle.
Whoa, hey now.
Some tentacle docking. All right. There's a topic right there.
Why are you so red, Eric?
Was it the tentacle dock?
Graham said, "My little tentacle," and I was like, I gotta go.
Eric had
right.
stirrings, so he's out.
Oh my gosh. All right.
I was working blue. Go ahead.
Now Andy's turn.
All right, Andy.
Okay.
You're visiting a museum, and you're just walking around, checking out the paintings, and nothing's really grabbing your attention. But there's this one that just gets you. You can't stop looking at it. Something about it, you feel right. But then without warning, you're pulled inside the painting. And then you realize you're on the other side. You're in a shadow world of portals and mirrors looking back on the real world. Try as you might, you can't get back through. You're stuck. But behind you, things begin to move. And they're all curious about the warm, living, delicious mortal that entered their domain. One weapon of choice, 3 books, and a luxury item. What do you do?
One weapon of choice. I'd probably go with a machine gun.
Okay.
All right.
I could mow people down. Nothing against a shotgun, but I mean, still gotta have to have some accuracy at that thing. And there's reloading involved. You give me that machine gun with a big ammo clip to it, strapped like Sergeant Rock, mow some shit down.
He didn't say you could have bandoliers. He just said you could have a gun.
Well, I gave you a luxury item.
So his lecture.
Oh, there's your luxury.
Bandoliers.
Bandolier. Oh,
There you go.
Hey,
And then what was it? I already blanked.
And 3 books.
3 books. 3.
If you want.
3 books. Man, let's see. I'm trying.
Well, you're stuck in a shadow realm with behind portals and mirrors, so
I
might
know.
get bored.
I might get bored. I'm not a huge. God, why is it? It's so sad. My mind just goes to comics and stuff.
Because that's where my mind goes to, and it's not sad. It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
those are
that's like
books.
a question of if you could only have 3 comics out of your whole collection, what would you keep? I'd keep my big Tarzan Joe Kubert Artist Edition because that thing you could beat the shit out of somebody with. So now I have a machine gun and a book that I could use as a weapon. And it's entertaining to look at. My Hal Foster Artist Edition because it's even bigger. So, I could use it as a mini bridge, I guess.
Bigger.
Yeah, and I could still beat people with it. Of course, I'd get tired carrying those things around because those things are huge. I forgot about that, lugging those around and a machine gun. I'll just go for 2. I can't think of a third one.
That works.
It's all
Actually,
good.
the joys of I'll go with the joys of sex. You never know. I could try and entertain the crowd that's on the other side looking at me. Just be like,
Okay.
wait, look at these pictures. Does any of this look
not
entertaining?
what I thought you were going to do to entertain the crowd.
Does any of this look appeasing to you? I'm game if you don't kill me. And a luxury item. Well, it's
Oh, you've
definitely
got
not
your
gonna be
bandoliers.
it won't be a comb.
Not even listening.
Yeah, I heard that. Could a sword be a luxury item? Because then I actually have 2 weapons.
I mean, technically, you'd have
You had 6 a
4,
second
'cause you have
ago.
2 books.
Yeah.
I've got the 2 huge books and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
These are just questions to put people on the spot, and like they creative types. It's like, what would you do in this crazy scenario? And the look everybody gets. I think the only one who was the gentleman of California. He was outside. He's like, I will punch that motherfucker in the
Krager.
face. They picked the wrong
Krager.
guy to
That
fuck.
was Jason Krager.
Yeah, Krager. Yeah.
He was like, they. I'm gonna take this dude hostage, and they're gonna regret coming for me. I was like, Krager, do you need a hug?
Yeah.
Bring it on, bitches.
He's like,
Yeah,
"Look,
and a police
I said I
baton
came from
to be able to kneecap him. And all this.
Well, he also
And-
so I could violate
Yes.
them. So,
Yeah.
Graham, I gotta be honest. I can't believe you didn't go with flamethrower.
My wife said I couldn't have one.
Aw.
This is an all made up thing.
All right.
I'm still hurting over that.
I know.
Andy.
Well,
I know.
I want to thank our 2 amazing guests for coming on. This was a very fun conversation to have, and a lot of really good value. I think everybody did really good with, kind of
well.
explaining. Really?
Oh.
Really?
See, that's where she said good. My mind didn't even think. Is that right or wrong?
I am gonna smack you, Gib, and we're in the same
Where?
state.
You're gonna smack me where?
In your bald spot.
Oh, in his little tentacle. His dangling whetstone.
Oh, come on.
Wow.
It also has eyeballs. It's weird. It's got eyes on it. It's weird.
Now I understand your writing.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone so much for, being here, having this conversation. I think there was a lot of good value, especially for some of the, newer writers or people who are really timid about their writing. This is a really good episode to kind of help you understand where to jump in and really just go for it. I mean, that's pretty much the consensus across the board. But
the only thing stopping you from writing is you. So
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm gonna play this back a lot to remember that. Thank you so much to both Andy Smith and Graham Nolan for being with us. You guys were amazing. Thank you so much to the panel, and we will catch you guys next week.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Writing Prose. Please like, share, and subscribe if you've enjoyed our content. You can also become a channel member or visit our merch store to help support us. We're currently accepting fan-submitted stories for anonymous, on-air review later in the season. Send your submissions to redvalkyrie.writingprose@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.